Lemon 64 presents a Playguide and video review. Sit back and enjoy the show.
Hi there, welcome to another Lemon 64 play guide and review. In this episode we'll be checking out Blue Max, originally developed by Bob Paulin and converted to the Commodore 64 by Peter Adams and released by Synapse Software in 1993. I had this on cassette, and this is how the cassette version is loaded. And yes, I do love the loading music and the loading screens on many of these 64 games. And there aren't that many people on YouTube that go to the trouble, usually, of showing you the loading experience. But on this game, you can see that there are quite a number of blocks to tick down. And while we're waiting for those blocks, we get the exciting music of the American National Anthem. After that, we get an exciting fiesta and a medley of public domain old-time music, most of which was created over 100 years ago so that US Gold didn't have to pay for it. And you can hear that ticks on down as we wait patiently for this thing to load. Next we have a pop classic from the 1780s, it's Yankee Doodle Dandy. On the title screen, an aircraft draws across the credits and you can see Blue Max, but not much else going on. This is an early game in 1983 and this was the dawn of the Commodore 64's heyday. Of course, this was a conversion from an Atari 8-bit game originally created by Bob Paulin, and Peter Adams basically converted it to the Commodore 64. Pressing the fire button, we take command of a biplane, and all we have to do is to press fire and wait for that thing to reach the end of the runway, and all we can do is push forward on the controller to take off. And if we pull back by mistake, then unfortunately we'll crash before we've even taken off, and if you get those controls reversed, as I am doing on this particular play, then unfortunately you will not be able to take off and you'll crash. Of course, we'll also have to watch out for those trees, and those appear at semi-random at the end of the runway, and so we'll have to pull up before that time, and we'll get some notice of when to pull up, as we shall see a little bit later on. But now we've got this crate into the air, all we can do is to blast away at the enemy, who are flying around, and also the landscape as well, bearing in mind not to crash into it. On the lower portion of the screen we can see a readout panel, and these are the basic flight controls that we can see: our altitude and speed, our fuel, and also the bombs remaining and the score. And also a P will appear on the screen when a plane is on the same screen as us, and it will flash yellow when we're on the same flight path as that plane, so we know we can shoot that thing down. But if we hold down the fire and pull back, we can also drop a bomb, and that's very handy, particularly for the installments or buildings which are dotted around. You have to blow those things up with a bomb, and you can also blow away cars and tanks and anything else which is on the ground. Occasionally, to interrupt our fun, we will find an L on the bottom of the screen, and that means that we must land pretty quickly. And you can see we've landed in a pretty short time, well before the base, which is on the runway. And if you land before that base, that's a pretty good indicator that we have enough runway left to take off again. You can see when the speed is over 100, then the speed counter will light up, and that means that we can push forward and we can lift into the sky. But apart from that, the main thing is to stay on the correct flight path to blow away these targets, and sometimes the target will flash to indicate that that's a mission target for which we'll get major score and major credit. We'll gain a different amount of score depending on what we blow up, and it is possible to blow up those ships which are floating down the river, and it's very good to do that. And it's also great to drop a bomb in front of a moving target like that, and that is relatively easy as long as we move to a lower altitude and let the car simply slam into that explosion. Sometimes we can, sometimes we can't, and you can see some random flak as well. But yet again, we have to land, and landing is a matter of lowering our altitude to 30 meters, and then we can line up with the runway and pull back on the stick to land. And again, that's quite disconcerting. And I think those guys can even drop bombs on us whilst we've landed and blow us up on the runway, but we have enough room to take off again, so we're onto another scenario. On the second scenario, we can find cars and runways and planes that we can blow up, but we can also take damage as well. You can see an M on the screen, and that means that we've taken some multi-damage, and that means it's pretty difficult to fly. And you will take all kinds of damage in this game, as we can see, and this will have different effects on the control and the ability to fly this wreck. Sometimes it's also easy to miss, and sometimes it can be luck over judgment, sometimes lining ourselves up with this 3D landscape, and I guess you could call this isometric 3D, but it's pretty similar to Zaxxon, which is what most of the magazine reviewers reviewed this, said that this game was like. And yes, this is a very Zaxxon-like game, apart from there are no higher and lower barriers to move around, there are no laser guns firing towards us, there are no missiles, or anything like that, electric fields or walls, and so this is absolutely nothing like Zaxxon whatsoever. Whilst we are on the ground, any damage will eventually get repaired, so the M you can see will eventually disappear, we'll gain some fuel and bombs, and then the mechanics will get to work, and then we are at our liberty to take off again. And now we can see that we have to reach that airspeed pretty quickly, and we have to dive upon the runway pretty quickly because some of those are pretty narrow in the game. By this stage we'll also have wind to deal with, and you can see the wind will appear on the bottom of the screen if that is an issue. So if you have motor damage and wind issues and you're trying to launch loads of bombs on the targets, you can see, well, that gets pretty difficult at the best of times, and that makes this game a challenge, and you can't always predict when you're going to sail through it and when you're going to have flak and blow up. My preferred tactic is to hold down the fire button just in case it blows any of the planes up ahead of us, which is usually 1 in 100 chance. And for the main part, I concentrate on dive bombing all these targets, and of course the closer you are to the ground, then the shorter distance that bomb will have to travel, and also the greater accuracy as well. So if you fly down to maybe 50 meters above the target, then you can try rapid fire more accurately on those targets. But for the main part, you have to just try to get what you can in this game, and sometimes you can't get anything, so sometimes random bombing is the best measure. You can see our fuel tank has taken a hit, so we're running out of fuel pretty damn rapidly. And you can see our B is flashing, which means the bombs are unable to launch because our bomb bays, or whatever they are on biplane, are stuck. So whilst we are here, let's refuel all the way to the top again, fighting against the hole in the tank. And then eventually our bombs will get resupplied, and also the hole in the fuel tank, and also the bomb bay mechanism hopefully will get restored, and we are at the mercy of all these aircraft in the meantime. This being 1983, we don't get any in-game music, and I'm pretty grateful for that given the standard of music in 1983. And the sound effects on offer are great. They remind us of a biplane, and I really can't imagine how those sound effects could have been bettered, and this really gives us a great atmosphere. And to my mind, this is a 3D game, so we really do get something different, and it's not simply a lunar jetpack game where we get a flat screen and we have to negotiate a pretty flat landscape. So this was a breakthrough in technology when it came along, and it copied hardware perhaps on the arcades as well at the time. This game was originally developed by Bob Paulin on the Atari 8-bit computers, and he also created Puzzle Panic and Blue Max 2001 in 1984. Many people hate Blue Max 2001, but he did create a legacy, and Peter Adams of course went on to Zaxxon on the Commodore 64 in 1984, and also created Panther in 1986. In this game there is lots to offer, and it certainly kept me entertained back in the day, and I did get pretty far, and perhaps as far as I'm going to get in this playthrough. There are a random set of levels, perhaps 3 different terrain types, and once you've won those out it's back to the start, and the game does loop like that, but it does give absolutely random buildings everywhere, so you can't always rely on the same buildings everywhere. Unfortunately, it doesn't destroy the buildings, and the next time you see this level, the buildings have returned. So it can feel a little samey, but you can see elevation changes on the floor and the ground level as the road meanders around. And it really is a short period between each bout, so as soon as you get that damage, you can more or less head on back to the runway and get yourself down to that landing strip and land. At this stage of the game, I can tell you that landing was very dodgy, and you can see I made a mess of it. You can see I'm almost lined up with the building, and any further ahead than that and I wouldn't have enough room to take off. So you have to be much behind the building, and that building unfortunately is the mark of doom, because if you are in front of it you'll die. Thankfully there are no trees at the end of that landing strip, and that's a good thing, and that is, as I say, at random. Sometimes you can get away with a large patch, so you can simply take off at your leisure, and sometimes you'll have to land pretty smartly in order to take off. And that's yet another one of those things in the game which makes it unique, and it's a pretty slick, fun game, and it reminds me of, well, Wings and Knights of the Sky on the Amiga, where it's a basic sortie around the First World War, and then you can come back, land and refuel and restock and fly out all over again. You can see we've broken the 3000 barrier, and when we crash and die it will give us a rank, and I think if you score over 3000 it gives us a class 3 air cadet rank, and over 5000 you get a class 2, and if you get over 6 or 7000 points then you'll at least get a class 1 air cadet or an air pilot, whatever that awards the player, and that means that the player will have to play this for at least maybe half an hour, 45 minutes to get that far. And unfortunately we won't be getting that far in this particular playthrough. That brings us on to the scores, and surprisingly CMVG, Home Computer Weekly, Your 64 and Your Computer all awarded this 6 out of 10. The current Lemon score is 8 out of 10, and Your Commodore gave this 5 out of 5, which is 10 out of 10 for the US Gold Reissue Edition, which they released in May 1985. And so US Gold snapped this up and it became a classic, and that's where I got it from. And I do think that this is a classic, even though I've just crashed. It doesn't give us a high score table, and I have got the Air Cadet Class 3. So, well, that's as far as I can get in this particular playthrough. Thank you once again for viewing another play guide, and I hope this has helped you understand this game and have a bash yourself. It's very fun, it's very playable, and it's one of my favourite games on the Commodore 64. Thank you.